The last thing my sister wrote was about a stone that called her by a nickname only I use. My niece, who is 23 and lives far from home for her job, was the one who first told me things were wrong. She and my sister used to speak on the phone at least 4 to 5 times every week, but her mother had changed in the last 6 months. They spoke less and less until she stopped picking up the phone entirely. My sister recently divorced and lives alone, so my niece asked her father to check on her. When he went to the house, she just hid inside and refused to open the door. Since I live just a couple of hours away, I drove there myself. I tried calling her on the way, but every call went directly to voicemail. When I arrived, it was early evening and the sun was setting. I knocked on every door and window with no answer. I eventually tried the back door on the side porch. It was unlocked. I entered, calling her name into the dark, quiet house. Nothing was out of order. Every room was perfectly clean, but the bed didn't look like anyone had slept there. Her phone was turned off on the kitchen counter next to her purse. Her driver's license, ID card, passport, and credit cards were all there. But that wasn't the worst part. That is when I started to feel that something was deeply wrong. I opened the fridge to find it empty except for 2 bottles of water. There was no food in the house, just water and coffee. A single water glass and coffee cup sat in the sink. It appeared she hadn't eaten at home in a long time. Her car was also missing from the garage. I checked her small office and found it in the same pristine condition. Inside a drawer, I found receipts from the last 7 to 8 months for nothing but water and coffee. I also found her journals. I sat at her desk and opened the latest one. There were drawings of people I didn't recognize. My sister is a journalist, and her last entry for a job was nearly a year ago, involving travel through the Middle East, including Iran, Lebanon, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. The entry was confusing, sounding more like a novel than a report. It was dated June 7th. She wrote that while walking through old ruins, she heard a voice call her name. Samantha, pick me up. She was spooked because nobody was near her. Then the voice said, "Down here, Sam. Pick me up." Only I call her Sam. She found a stone that was darker and smoother than the others. When she moved it with her foot, the voice spoke again, telling her it would tell her a secret story if she picked it up. She wrote that it was as big as a child's fist, gray with thin red lines, and she felt the fear disappear once she held it. I was confused, but I didn't tell my niece about the journal when I called her. She decided to fly home immediately. I filed a missing person report, but the police believed she had simply gone somewhere and forgotten her belongings. They flagged her car and left, advising me to wait at the house. I kept reading. In a June 13th entry, she mentioned getting an MRI because she was worried about the voices, but the results were normal. By June 15th, she was terrified. She wrote about the stone calling to her from a window, telling her it had many stories to tell. She was losing herself, and I was running out of time. She said the stone's name was Athaya, and it claimed to have seen cities buried under the sand and every sunrise on Earth. I must have fallen asleep on the couch because I woke up to my phone buzzing. It was my niece, desperate for news. I calmed her down and then spent the day checking the local police station and the park where my sister used to jog. I found nothing. Returning to the house, I noticed the heavy shades were drawn, which wasn't like her. A neighbor showed me his security footage. I saw her on camera, but she looked different, thinner, wearing a white summer dress with long black hair. She never wore dresses and hadn't changed her hair like that since high school. At 4:25 a.m., Her car left the garage, but then she ran back inside to leave something white before driving away for good. I ran to the garage and found a note on some boxes. It said, "I know this doesn't make sense, leaving a letter for someone who was never really there, but if you're reading this, you're probably missing me. Please don't." It made me angry. I went back to the journal. On June 29th, she wrote that the stone told her she could only hear its voice because she was starving herself. The stone claimed the food of this world was poison that prevented people from hearing the other worlds. My sister had lost her mind. 2 days passed with no news. This morning, I stepped out of the shower and heard a voice call my name. "Dean!" I wrapped a towel around me and ran into the hallway. I asked where they were, and the voice answered, "I'm right here, Dean, on the window, and I have a lot of stories to tell you." Up next, I went to my daughter-in-law's grave, and the corpse from the plot next to it climbed out to warn me. "She is my wife." "She is not your wife," I tried to explain. "That's not true, Dad. She is my wife, and we're about to have a child. The child we've been longing for all these years," my son said. "She died," I shouted. "She met with an accident. We buried her ourselves." "What are you talking about?" my son said. "Nothing like that ever happened." "It did," I yelled. "Look at the mark on her forehead. It looks as if someone split her skull open, removed her brain, and replaced it with their own." "That mark must be from the accident," my son said. "But just now you said there was no accident," I asked. "Yes, but now I remember," my son replied. "It did happen, and she survived." "No," I said. "She didn't survive. She was killed." "Listen to me carefully, my child," I said. "That is definitely some other entity, something that stole your dead wife's body, and it seems it has already deceived you as well. I don't have much time." "What's going on, Dad?" his wife said, entering the room. Before I could say anything, she clutched her stomach and collapsed to the floor, laughing. "It looks like the time has come," my son shouted with joy. "You'll have to go to the hospital," he said to his wife. They got into the car, laughing and shouting as they drove away. I stood there, watching them through the window as they disappeared. But that wasn't the worst part. He didn't say a single word to me, as if I wasn't even there. He was so happy. That's all I kept thinking. But the truth was hiding in the dirt. I couldn't stay there. I had to see her grave immediately, even though it was past midnight. Walking and walking, I reached the graveyard. As far as I could see, there was no one. Using my torchlight, I found her grave. It didn't look like the grave had been disturbed. Just then, I saw a corpse climb out of another grave, completely decayed, its rotting body still covered in soil. I stepped back in fear. It raised its hand at me, as if signaling me to wait. In its hand was a board with something written on it. It placed the board on my daughter-in-law's grave, then calmly returned to its own grave, lay down, and covered itself with soil. When my heartbeat slowed a little, I forced myself to step forward and read the sign. "This grave has been tampered with." I understood. Gathering my courage, I started digging, and when I did, my daughter-in-law's body was gone. Now everything made sense. This body, the one walking around, was my daughter-in-law's body. But when even a corpse itself was saying that this grave had been disturbed, then something was terribly wrong. I ran straight to the hospital. The air tasted like pennies and old rot. Outside the delivery room, instead of screams, I heard only laughter. I saw my son standing outside, one hand covering his mouth, his face unusually serious. I went up to him. "Listen, son, I just came from your wife's grave." Before I could finish, he shot me a sideways glance filled with pure rage, as if one more word and he would strangle me right there. I stepped back. The laughter stopped. Then the doctor came out. We were seconds away from a nightmare we couldn't escape. "What happened?" my son asked. The delivery was successful, but," the doctor said. "But what?" I asked. "What happened?" my son repeated. When the doctor stayed silent, my son shoved him aside and stormed inside. I followed. His wife was holding the baby, but that thing didn't look like a baby at all. Its entire body was black. It had a tail and two small horns. Its eyes glowed yellow, as if lights were switched on inside them. It wasn't crying. It was roaring. A roar so powerful it shook the entire hospital. A monster was born, and nobody was safe now. My son seemed completely unaffected. He dropped to his knees and began caressing it. "Look, Dad," my son called out to me. Sweat poured down my body. My eyes moved to his wife. She was smiling at me, giving me a crooked, knowing look. "Yes, I see," I said. Slowly, I noticed the child's body growing. "What's happening to it?" I asked. "Is it growing?" his wife said. "Yes, Dad," my son agreed. "But isn't this wrong?" I questioned. "How can a child grow so fast?" "Enough, Dad," his wife said. "We've been listening to you all day." "Yes, Dad," my son added. "You've been after my wife since morning, and now you even have a problem with my son. Why don't you just leave us alone?" Those words shattered my heart. If I spoke even one more word, I would break down crying. I nodded silently and walked downstairs. My heart didn't want to leave. It felt as if my body was hurt more by his words than my mind was. My heart begged me to stay, but my body kept moving slowly, helplessly away from him. As soon as I reached outside the hospital, I heard doctors screaming. Through the window, I saw the creature leap out and hang onto a tree. It had just been born, yet it looked 12 or 13 years old. Blood dripped from its mouth. Before I could even process that, I saw my daughter-in-law jump after it and cling to it. Then wings burst out of the creature's back. They flew laughing into the blood-red moon. After witnessing this, my insides burned. Patients and doctors were running outside, screaming in chaos. I turned and ran back inside toward my son. Some doctors stood frozen outside the room, some crying, some covering their mouths in shock. I looked inside. My son was dead. Half of his body was missing. "It ate him," one of the doctors said. I collapsed onto the floor, and only then did I understand how that creature had grown so fast. Up next, my girlfriend bit me, and now all I can think about is the taste of raw meat. I won't go into too much detail, but she had been all over me. At the time, I didn't see anything wrong with it, but looking back, the fact that she didn't have alcohol on her breath was a red flag. We were well past the honeymoon phase, but in this particular instance, it felt like I was her crush again, like she had been craving me for years in silence, and now she finally had access to me. When her teeth clamped tightly on my neck, I just thought her excitement was getting the better of her. It wasn't until I felt the warm liquid running down my throat and into the dents around my clavicle that I mustered up the willpower to put up some resistance. "Ow, honey, you bit me a little hard there, don't you think?" I asked, chuckling a bit. Instead of apologizing or acknowledging her mistake, she proceeded to bite me again, this time directly on the lip, drawing blood immediately. Now I was getting irritated. Pushing her off me into the side of the bed, I got up, flustered, and ran to the bathroom to examine myself, while my girlfriend pouted into a pillow. Both wounds were worrisome. It had only been 5 minutes, and already the bite mark on my neck looked green with infection. The blood wasn't letting up either. It leaked out of me at a rate that put me into fight or flight mode. But the infection in my neck was only the beginning. Hurrying out of the bathroom, I announced that I desperately needed to get to a hospital. This wasn't just some mistake in bed. This looked malicious. I was shocked at the fit my girlfriend threw, screaming and crying at the top of her lungs for me to not go to a hospital, saying she'd take care of it here. I figured she was embarrassed, since we would have to tell the doctor what had happened. I could see her face turning red at the mere thought of it. I assured her, doctors have heard way worse than this, but she was not having it. I finally relented and allowed her to bandage my neck while I chose to deal with the pain in my lip. She wrapped my neck 3 times with gauze, and when she finished, she stood on her tiptoes to kiss me on my flushed cheek. She lingered for a moment. Usually when she did this, I could see the love and admiration in her eyes. I always loved that look. It revealed how much she truly did care for me. This wasn't that look, though. No, this was a look of hunger, an almost lustful hunger, like she wanted to devour me. "Thanks, honey. I don't think I'm really in the mood anymore. Is it okay if we just go to sleep?" She didn't answer at first. She just stood there, swaying back and forth like the wind was pushing her. Her face sank into a look of unbridled anger for a split, barely noticeable second before curling back into a genuine-looking smile. I was losing blood, and my girlfriend was acting like a monster. "Of course, honey. Let me just go get changed into my pajamas," she chirped, slinking past and pushing me out of the bathroom. Meandering to the bed, I stiffly tucked myself under the covers and stared at the ceiling for a while. I stayed in that position for around 10 minutes, and my girlfriend still had not left the bathroom. I slowly drifted into unconsciousness. I was surprised I even woke up the next morning. I remembered my neck throbbing before I fell asleep, and I couldn't tell if it was exhaustion or loss of blood that made me pass out. My girlfriend was still not in bed with me. I was bleeding out, and the woman I loved was gone. However, the bathroom door was now open, and I could see her clothes on the floor in front of the sink. When I tried to turn my neck, it felt like I was being stung by 1,000 wasps right where I had been bitten. I waddled over to the bathroom, trying my best not to move my head. What I saw in the mirror disgusted me to the point that I was hunched over the toilet vomiting within moments. My bandage wrap had become completely black with blood, and trails of the substance branched off down my shoulder and into my chest in sharp black lines. Upon closer inspection, I was appalled to find that they were veins that had become off-colored. What caused me to lean over the toilet wasn't the color, though. No, what had me begging for mercy was the fact that those veins were moving, pulsating to the rhythm of my beating heart. After wiping the vomit from my mouth, I backed out of the bathroom, urgently calling my girlfriend's name. I did this repeatedly with no response. However, I heard something coming from the kitchen, almost like someone was rummaging through our drawers. I walked into the room and found my girlfriend squatting nude in front of the open freezer door, gnawing on a raw, frozen steak while prying at it with her fingers. She made these wet, animalistic noises, grunting and growling at the same time. Her eyes slowly rose from the meat to meet mine. It wasn't her anymore. My girlfriend's eyes had been hazel. This thing's eyes were pitch black, void of any light whatsoever. I expected her to charge me, but instead, her eyes fell back on the meat. Once she finished, she began pulling more meat out of the freezer. Chicken, steak, beef, pork. I turned around in absolute dismay, too stunned to even think. It felt mechanical as I glided over to the phone to dial 911. I had my hand on the phone, ready to dial, when the smell hit me. It was the most delicious smell I'd ever witnessed, a sweet, roasted smell. I felt like a cartoon character getting carried by the aroma to my girlfriend's side. Part of me knew what I wanted was unholy, but I couldn't help myself. Reaching my hand into a pack of ground beef, I noticed the black veins had now stretched down and were kissing my wrist. Their pulsations were like a dance of excitement for the meal before us. Ripping through the plastic, I pulled out a fistful of the red meat and shoved it into my mouth. I have never tasted anything more orgasmic. I couldn't even stop myself. I was pulling out another fistful before I had even swallowed my first bite. I just kept going. It wasn't long before I found myself making the same grunts as my girlfriend. It was like an automatic response, like my mind and body had broken through a barrier. I couldn't even feel the icy air from the freezer as we feasted. All I knew was that I had a buffet laid out in front of me and a beautiful girl to enjoy it with. Unfortunately, that buffet did run out eventually, and once it did, my girlfriend and I definitely craved more. I think our neighbors will have plenty to share. Up next, 50 inmates in the laundry room just stopped working to give me the exact same wide-eyed stare. Every time I tried to get some rest, I saw the bloodied eyes of the inmates staring back at me. Being alone with my thoughts led to my imagination running rampant. Before I knew it, I was terrified at the idea of stepping back in there on Monday as if nothing had happened. Despite all that, I showed up. My alarm did not have the opportunity to ring before I turned it off, already awake after yet another sleepless night. I got ready and drove all the way there with my heart racing. I entered the building using the brand new ID card they gave me and went to Mr. Hiley's office. The metal door I stood in front of was painted a sickly tan color to match the cinder block walls and was marked with a nameplate that read M. Hiley. Before I had the chance to knock, the door swung open. Hiley greeted me, a smile on his face. "Good morning. I was just about to meet you in the lobby. We're going on a little field trip, so drop your stuff off and we'll head right out," he said. I did as he instructed and met back up with him just outside the doorway. We walked to another room labeled laundry, which was one of the many rooms we passed on the walkthrough last week but did not enter. This time, he guided me inside. And then things got weird. 50 or so inmates toiled away like worker bees, presumably so deep in focus that they didn't even notice Hiley and me entering. The large room was divided into two main sections, with washers in one part and dryers in the other. The linoleum beneath my feet was a sterile white, much like everything else in there. He had to yell over the sound of the machines in the room as we toured it. "This is our laundry room. As with nearly every prison, we put our men to work in order to keep this place up and running. We assign every prisoner a job that we believe will suit them best in order to maximize performance," he explained. "How do you decide who goes where?" I yelled back. "During their intake, Dr. Kendrick performs a psychological evaluation in which she asks all kinds of questions, and based on their answers, we sort them into the job they'd be best fit for. Besides the laundry, we have inmates work in the kitchen, library, and post office. Inmates can also perform janitorial work or other groundskeeping jobs. All of that is to say that we keep our men busy, he concluded with a smile. As we geared up to leave, I felt a chill rack down my spine. It froze me mid-step and made goosebumps break out on my skin. At that moment, I understood how deer felt when some sixth sense told them a sight was pointed straight at their neck. I looked around in an attempt to find the source of my fear, only to see that every single prisoner had stopped in his tracks to look at me as I was leaving. They wore the same crazed, inhumanly wide-eyed expression as the tattooed inmate from a few days ago. My heart started pounding faster than it already had before, and I darted out of the room without sparing another glance behind me. Hailey had already crossed the threshold of the door when I caught up with him, not too far behind, but significantly more shaken than he was. Tears threatened to spill from my eyes, and my breath never quite made it to my lungs when they so desperately needed the oxygen. I needed to contain myself. I couldn't blow this opportunity by showing my fear, weakness, or confusion. Not seeing the internal battle I was fighting, Hailey moved to keep walking, but when I piped up with hesitation, he turned to face me. If I didn't get answers soon, I might never leave. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like the inmates here are acting a little strange, I said meekly. This was an understatement, but I didn't want to step on any toes when I just started working here. Why is that? I remember in the research I conducted on the first day, and even when I was applying for the position, I had seen that it was a lower security, more humanitarian prison. This was strange because it housed dangerous and mentally ill prisoners, the lowest of the low, some might say. People like that usually belonged in a maximum security penitentiary, where their every move could be tracked, not in a place where they could wander and potentially cause trouble. After a brief pause, he said, "Well, I'm not exactly sure what strange behavior you're referring to, but I'm sure Dr. Kendrick can provide a better explanation of what we do here." We made the trek back to her office in silence, and when we reached her door, he rapped his knuckle lightly against it. He opened it to Kendrick at her desk, her glasses perched at the end of her nose, heavily engrossed in whatever she was working on at her computer. At the sound of us opening the door, she looked up and said, "Ah, you two. Come on in." Mr. Hailey explained that he was just dropping me off once again while he went and did who knows what. I sat across from her and repeated what I asked Hailey. Why the hell were the prisoners acting so weird when they were supposed to be at peace here? As you might have read, we're taking a more humanistic approach to corrections. Prisons in the United States have put too much emphasis on incapacitation rather than rehabilitation, which has proven to be the most effective way to correct behavior and reduce recidivism. We're aiming to fix that by making a self-sufficient, commune-style correctional facility where people can really learn from their mistakes and reintegrate into society, she said, as if reading from a textbook. Our prisoners are always like that. If they were behaving weirdly, I assure you our officers would have noticed. I couldn't believe it. How could neither of them see how abnormal this is? Putting aside the fact that they were way too subdued, the look in their eyes was anything but normal. However, I had to accept her response as truth. We talked more about what knowledge and experience I have with corrections. I recounted the classes and volunteering I've done, and how this is my first time learning about a prison like this one. Hailey came just as there was a lapse in conversation, and I was grateful I wouldn't have to think about another topic to speak to her about. I was still incredibly suspicious of all the bullshit she spewed earlier. Mr. Hiley explained that we were heading to check out the library next, since it was one of the nicer facilities in the prison, but he stopped mid-explanation with an exasperated look on his face. "Shoot, I forgot I had a report to write and send to HQ. Why don't you go and tour the library for yourself while I get a head start on this work? There shouldn't be anyone else in there but a clerk at the checkout counter," he said hurriedly, before scurrying back to his office. I wondered what kind of pressing work waited for him. I meandered the rest of the way to the library, wasting time I would otherwise have spent doing the menial work highly assigned to me. The library's wooden double doors stood out from the concrete and metal the rest of the facility was constructed with. I opened them and gaped in awe at what I saw inside. What looked like hundreds of rows of books greeted me from their wooden shelves. It had that dusty old smell typical of libraries that didn't see many visitors. I thought I was alone, but someone was watching me. I looked up to see a balcony lining the perimeter of the room, with even more books on shelves. If it weren't in a prison, I would have loved to sit here and do my homework. In the middle of the room, my eyes found the prisoner manning the checkout counter, as Hiley said someone would be. He had medium-length, disheveled hair that curled over his brow, and a full beard that covered the lower half of his face. Thin, wire-rimmed glasses covered the top half. His sleeves were rolled up to reveal black ink on his forearms. I was content to ignore him and browse the shelves in silence, but he apparently had a different idea. "You must be the new intern. How's the job treating you?" he asked me as I walked past where he was seated at the desk. His voice was deep but soft in a way I wouldn't expect from a calloused criminal. I stopped in my tracks and faced the counter. It felt like there was an ocean of distance between us. "It's all right so far," I replied, slightly nervous at how he had confronted me so boldly. "What about the other inmates?" he pressed, looking at me expectantly. This was a weird line of questioning, but I was afraid that not responding would lead to a potentially violent confrontation. "They're all right, too. A little strange, but," I said, the rest of my sentence dying away on my lips. I was hesitant to reveal all that had happened with them, in case he also didn't believe me. "Why do you ask?" "No particular reason." I thought that was it, so I turned away, ready to go back to scanning the aisles of books. "They look at you like that because they're asking for help," he said from behind me. I turned back slowly. "What?" I asked, incredulous. How did he know that? "Why don't you meet me here again next time you work, and we'll talk more. I've kept you here long enough," he said, as a gentle smile graced his face. I didn't say anything as I turned to walk back to Hiley's office. I threw him one last glance over my shoulder before I left, and I saw he was looking at me until I closed the door. I didn't know what to do with what little information he gave me. What did he mean they're asking for help? It seemed like he was the only other normal person here, the only one who might be able to give me answers. I might just have to meet up with him again. Satisfaction might just bring the cat back after all. I'm now up late once again thinking about the past few days at work and deliberating my options. Besides that prisoner, you were the only ones I can confide in. I would love to know your thoughts on what I should do next. Up next. My friend moderated r/nosleep until he found the list of survival rules on his own kitchen counter. I have always been an insomniac. Way back when I was young enough to eat Lego, I would catch myself staring at the ceiling in the darkness, waiting for sunrise. This obviously impacted everything from my social life to my schoolwork. When the pandemic happened, my parents got me my own computer for school. This was when I discovered Reddit and, subsequently, nosleep. Before the first-hand paranormal accounts, it was a popular sister subreddit of insomnia. I even made some close friends there, like a guy by the name of Stronk. He was one of the moderators, and he was a security guard with nothing better to do than to hop on a company computer and shoot the crap with us online. His real name was Richard, but he preferred Stronk. He was the one that spotted the first story of the subreddit. "Help! I'm stuck inside my basement, and I'm hearing strange sounds coming from a corner." Lemillion23 was the poster, a regular of the sub. He locked himself in, and now he was just stuck there, waiting for rescue. We gave him some company, but he kept going on about this weird noise. Then, weeks went by without a single peep. A post appeared with the same format and the same poster, but the title included Part 2. But that wasn't the worst part. He was still going on about his basement. But now he was talking about stairs that just kept going deeper and deeper into the earth. That was the last time Lemillion23 ever posted. But he wasn't the last. People left and right posted their own stories and disappeared. The regulars went out first, then the newbies. I was lucky enough to leave the subreddit before anything else happened. My place of solitude became nothing more than a place for cheap horror stories. In our Discord, Stronk was talking about his new apartment. There, on the kitchen counter, he found a list of things he had to do to survive the place. I found out about his story 2 weeks after the talk. Everything the story said checked out with the things he mentioned on our call. Every single bit of information about nosleep was either erased or modified. Now it stands as a refuge for the sleepless souls that have to deal with the horrors of this world. Throughout the years, I have read some truly horrifying things on this subreddit. Most might be fake, sure, but the fact that one, or a few, might be real still sends shivers down my spine. So be careful out there, insomniacs, because you might be next.